Hello there, how are you? If you're reading this, chances are the soft whir of the fan is beyond quite lulling you to sleep and your mind is still wandering. So, let's wander together, back to a London lit by gas lamps and secrets, where footsteps echoed against cobbled streets, and behind velvet curtains whispered stories most people dared not hear. This isn't the tale of silk and sin that penny novels promised. No, this is what it really felt like to be one of the forgotten women who moved between shadows, half survival, half performance. The red lamps weren't just a signal, they were shields. Inside those doors, tea was poured, conversations rehearsed, reputations destroyed, and rarely ever real love dared to knock. You're about to step into a world that wasn't glamorous. It was ritual, routine, and quiet resilience. And as the hour grows late, maybe the faded perfume and distant laughter will lull you into dreams not sweet ones, but the kind laced with mystery and memory. So settle in. Let the story dim the lights in your mind. Victorian London is waiting. The cobblestones were slick with evening rain, the kind that left London's gutters whispering secrets only they heard. Gas lamps glowed like distant sentinels, their flickering light warped through damp glass. Steam curled from underground grates, swirling around ankles and ankles only never rising high enough to warm a heart. Clara Hughes stood before the house on Pembury Lane, her suitcase damp at the corners, her gloves worn thin. To passer-by, she may have looked like any other wayward soul seeking shelter, but inside that narrow brick building was no ordinary refuge. Above the front door hung a crimson velvet curtain, barely visible from the street, a silent signal to those who knew. Behind that curtain lived the kind of silence that didn't come from peace, but from stories too heavy to speak aloud. She had heard whispers about Madame Eloise's house. Some said it was the safest place a girl could work, others that it traded reputation for discretion. Clara didn't care. She had run out of options 3 train stops ago. Inside, the wallpaper smelled of lavender and secrets. The parlor was dimly lit, its plush armchairs worn but welcoming. Every footstep was muffled by thick rugs, every sound softened into velvet silence. And then, from behind a heavy curtain, came the voice. "You're early," Madame Eloise said, appearing like mist from nowhere. Her hair was the color of polished copper and her eyes shone with something sharper than kindness. "I can work," Clara replied. It was all she had to offer. No references, no family, no skills but survival. Madame Eloise studied her quietly. Then she nodded once. "You'll sleep in room 7. Someone will show you how things run in the morning. There's tea in the back, if you care for it." Clara nodded, but she didn't move. Something about the place, its stillness, its curated decor, held her in place like a painting hung crooked on the wall. "You came through the curtain," Madame said, almost absently. "Most don't know what that means until it's too late." Clara didn't answer. Behind her, the velvet swayed as if stirred by something unseen. And just like that, the door clicked shut behind her. The house on Pembury Lane was older than it looked. Its bricks bore the grime of industrial London, but inside, it moved with a rhythm not unlike clockwork, a rhythm dictated not by time, but reputation. Clara awoke in room 7 to the dull knock of breakfast. A girl with copper curls and a sassy tilt to her brow peeked in through the door. "Come on, new blood. Eggs'll be cold. Madame likes us sharp at the table." Her name was Ivy. Sharp voice, soft hands, one front tooth ever so slightly chipped. She smiled like she'd learned how in a mirror. Downstairs, the dining room felt like a theater, after curtain corpulent in its details, worn in its soul. Velvet curtains, mahogany table, silver trays, with just enough tarnish to prove they were real. 7 girls sat together, faces painted but tired. Clara took her seat silently, beneath a chandelier whose crystals tinkled faintly every time someone shifted their chair. No one talked about their past. Names weren't asked. Only glances exchanged, some curious, some guarded. Madame Eloise entered in a haze of lilac perfume and pressed silence. She didn't sit, she observed. "Tonight," she said, without looking at anyone in particular, "we expect gentlemen of Parliament and the arts. Mr. Barrington prefers laughter. Mr. Greaves insists on French, and Lady Whit. She comes for the ledger." The room went still. Clara wasn't sure what the ledger meant, but Ivy's smile faded as if someone had whispered her real name. "And you," Madame's gaze finally landed on Clara. "You'll stay close to Ivy. Watch. Listen. Do not speak unless spoken to." There was no ceremony, no orientation speech. Clara was now part of the routine. Later, Ivy whispered as they polished decanters in the parlor, "This place, it pretends to be mercy, but mercy doesn't make you memorize someone else's lies." Clara looked at her, startled. Ivy shrugged. "Keep quiet, keep moving, and don't ever open the ledger." Above them, the velvet curtain swayed again. This time, Clara wondered if the house itself breathed. The drawing room was set like a stage. Silk cushions fluff, crystal decanters gleaming, candles trimmed and glowing with soft amber light. Clara stood near the fireplace, hands folded, her corset cinching more than just her breath. It clenched her nerves. Ivy moved through the room with practiced grace, every smile calculated, every nod designed. "You don't need to like it," she murmured to Clara as she passed. "Just don't look like you don't." The evening clientele arrived one by one. Mr. Barrington, first plump and powdered, with a laugh too eager for silence. He requested riddles. Ivy obliged with riddles laid in innuendo. Clara watched, puzzled by how laughter could be so transactional. Then Mr. Greaves, tall and skeletal, with fingers that seemed to speak before his mouth did. He muttered in French, bad French, but the girls responded with fluid flattery. Clara didn't understand half of it, and neither, she suspected, did Greaves. But the room changed when Lady Whitmore entered. She was dressed in mourning silks, though no one could recall who she mourned. Her gloves were black lace, fingertips stained with ink. She never touched the girls. She never smiled, but she always drank tea. Clara was tasked with serving it. She placed the delicate porcelain cup before Lady Whitmore, hands steady until the woman whispered, "You're new." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know what this tea is?" "No, ma'am." Lady Whitmore inhaled the steam, her eyes never leaving Clara's. "It's chamomile, with valerian, a sleep aid, an old favorite, also favored by the quiet poisoners of Brighton." Clara stiffened. "Don't worry," Lady Whitmore said softly. "You're not meant to drink it." With that, she produced a small notebook no larger than a hand and began to write. The velvet ledger. Clara pretended not to stare, but she could see names, symbols, gold marks, red crosses. Ivy had warned her once, "Don't open it," but no one had said anything about glimpsing. Madame Eloise appeared just then, as if summoned. "Let Lady Whitmore have her piece," she said smoothly, "and Clara, follow Ivy to the upstairs parlor." Clara nodded, stepping back, her heart beating in her ears. Later, upstairs, Ivy found her staring at nothing. "She writes more than names in that book," Ivy whispered. "She writes what people wish they'd said, and who said too much." Clara didn't reply. She was remembering the way Lady Whitmore smiled, just once when she mentioned poison, and the tea still steamed below, untouched. By dawn, the house had shed its velvet allure. The chandeliers stood dim, the perfume faded, the laughter long gone. What remained was the quiet breathing of women who had weathered the evening and were now folding themselves back into something ordinary. Clara sat at the edge of the narrow iron bed in room 7, her fingers tracing the curve of a chipped porcelain basin. She hadn't slept. Not really. The images of last night still clung to her mind like cobwebs. Lady Whitmore's stare, Mr. Barrington's booming voice, Ivy's practiced smirk. The knock came soft but sure. "I brought you tea," said Lily, the youngest of the girls, a wisp of a thing with dandelion hair and a permanent nervous smile. She carried the tray with both hands as if balancing hope and habit. "We always do tea in the morning. It's the rule." Lily shrugged. "Unwritten, like most things here." Over weak tea and dry toast, Clara met the rest of them not as performers, but as people. There was Elsie, with eyes that missed nothing and a laugh that never quite reached them. There was May, an older girl with shoulders squared like armor and hands that stitched faster than thought. And Ivy, of course, who appeared last sleepy-eyed but alert, hair tied loosely, her corset abandoned for a frayed dressing gown. "Clara, right?" Elsie asked, her voice easy. "Welcome to the gaggle." "What's the gaggle?" "Us," May said. "The untouchables, the washable ones. Not the exclusive Velvet Ledger Club, mind you. We just serve, smile, and survive." Clara found herself nodding, unsure of where she fit. "We watch out for each other," Ivy said suddenly. "Madame won't say it. She doesn't interfere unless reputation's at stake. But we're sisters," Lily whispered. The word hung in the air, fragile as lace. Not all of them liked each other. Not all of them trusted each other. But there was something binding in shared silence, in knowing what someone else fears without them saying a word. "That man last night," Clara began. Ivy held up a finger. "Some things you ask, some things you learn." Later that morning, they gathered to wash linens. "Muhammad," Lily cried quietly over a frayed ribbon. Elsie sharpened a pair of shears while staring out the window at the fog. And Clara, for the first time since stepping through the curtain, felt both seen and invisible part of something, and apart from it. At lunch, Madame Eloise told them 3 new gentlemen would arrive. No names, just preferences. One liked violin music. One demanded absolute silence. One paid in coin older than the house itself. And as the girls returned to their roles, Clara realized, by day, they stitched lace and shared tea. By night, they became actresses in a play written by others. But in the in-between, between night and day, tea and silence, they were more than roles. They were the gaggle. The sitting room was polished until it gleamed like the lie it offered. Safety. The girls wore navy silk this evening, stitched with silver thread. Madame Eloise had insisted, "It's a gentleman's night." That meant less laughter, more whispers. No perfume too bold, no lipstick that stained. Clara, now 3 nights in, had learned to keep her posture exact and her expressions delicate. Every raised brow, every murmur, every blink might be read as invitation or insult. The first to arrive was Mr. Ambrose a man whose boots clicked like gavel strikes, whose cane wasn't for walking but for emphasis. A rising member of Parliament. His coat alone cost more than the girls' combined yearly income, but his eyes held something darker than power, they held expectation. Madame greeted him with a gloved hand and a smile carved from diplomacy. "This way, Mr. Trenwith," Ivy said, guiding him to the velvet settee with a practiced sweep. Clara remained nearby, serving brandy and small talk. "I do hope London's behaving," Ivy teased. "London rarely behaves," Mr. Trenwith replied with a smooth chuckle. "That's why I visit places where discretion is not just encouraged but enforced." Claire felt his glance, not leering, calculating. In a corner, Elsie played violin. The song was melancholic, almost mournful, the kind one might hum in confession. Later, as the night settled deeper, Clara found herself outside the door to the study room rarely used except for clients of importance. From behind it, low voices hummed. Mr. Trenwith, Madame Eloise, and name Whitmore rifted through the door. Clara froze. "I'll vote as agreed," Mr. Trenwith said, "provided your ledger remains selective. Some names do not belong beside others." Madame's voice was silk. "Lady Whitmore records what she sees. I only offer shade, silence." Then coins clinked. A drawer closed. Clara stepped back, her pulse thunderous. Later, Ivy found her staring into her untouched tea. "Politics smell worse than whiskey in this house," she muttered. "Men come here not just for comfort but for leverage, and when they leave, they think they've paid for silence." Clara whispered, "That ledger, does it hold names like his?" Ivy nodded slowly. "And yours, and mine, and hers." She pointed to Elsie, still playing the same sad melody. Clara said nothing more, but that night, sleep came later than usual, tangled with thoughts, not just of survival but of power masquerading as civility. The house was quieter than usual. Outside, London murmured behind fog and coal smoke, the sound of carriages muffled by slush. Inside, however, something sharper than silence was spreading, a tension, subtle and sour. Clara had begun to notice things, how Madame Eloise paused when certain names were spoken, how Ivy's laughter flickered like candlelight around certain guests, and how the ledger, the small leather book kept near the decanters, always changed locations. "That morning," Lily whispered, "don't look at it too long. Lady Whitmore says it sees back." Clara smiled faintly, but the unease lingered. She had seen symbols, a crescent moon beside Ivy's name, a gold leaf near May's, her own. Nothing yet. Later, Madame summoned Clara to the study. Her heels clicked against the wood like a metronome set to verdict. "I want you to transcribe," Madame said, gesturing to the ledger. Clara blinked. "Me? You're right. Well, you observe. And you haven't yet formed bad habits." Madame opened the ledger. It was a quilt of names, favors, warnings. One page held addresses, not of clients, but of men who had promised protection. Another page bore initials paired with numbers, dates and consequences. Clara's fingers trembled as she saw Ivy's name linked to Mr. Trenwith, a red cross beside a poet known only by a pseudonym. Lady Whitmore's notes in ink so dark it looked like dried blood. Madame watched her closely. "This book does not protect," she said. "It balances. What happens if someone sees it?" Clara asked. Madame closed the ledger with quiet finality. "Then we choose who is seen in return." That night, Clara found Ivy staring at the fireplace. "You transcribed," Ivy said flatly. "It changes you." "Not yet," Clara whispered. "Give it time." Later, Elsie brought brandy to Ivy and hummed under her breath. May repaired a hem. Lily sang quietly to herself in the corner. The house shifted around Clara like velvet folds, soft, unyielding, full of secrets, and the ledger sat hidden again beneath Madame's writing desk, its spine worn smooth by discretion. The fog rolled in thicker than usual, muffling London's sounds until everything felt wrapped in cotton and secrets. Clara stood at the window of room 7, watching carriages blur into shadows and silhouettes merge with lamplight. Then came the knock, not at her door but downstairs, sharp, precise, not the rhythm of a client. No perfume drifted through the house, no expectation of flirtation, just a man in a dark overcoat and grey gloves, asking for Madame Elo. "I'm looking into a matter," he said flatly, voice like gravel scrubbed clean. "A disappearance." Madame met him in the study, her tone smooth as ever. "We host guests, not ghosts. I fear you've taken a wrong turn." Clara, curious and cautious, lingered near the stairwell. The man's name was Mr. Merrick. He claimed to be a private solicitor, but Ivy murmured later, "That coat screams investigator." Solicitors don't sniff the rugs for footprints. Mr. Merrick asked questions no one wanted to answer. Had anyone seen a girl named Cecilia Woodcroft? Was she ever employed here? Had anyone heard rumors? The air grew colder with every inquiry. May whispered to Clara, "Girls vanish, not always because someone took them. Sometimes they just leave and erase themselves." But Clara couldn't stop thinking about the name. Cecilia. She had heard it once, days ago, mumbled by Lily in sleep. A name clung to a dream. Mr. Merrick didn't stay long, but before he left, he paused at the parlour door, gazing at the velvet curtain. "I know places like this," he said, "more to the air than to anyone. Beauty wears a mask, so does sorrow." Then he tipped his hat and disappeared into the fog. Later, Claire asked Ivy, "Did you know Cecilia?" Ivy stared into her tea. "We all did, once. But this place erases loud things. Her name got too loud." And just like that, the topic was folded away, like lace pressed between pages. A visit from the Queen. She arrived unannounced. A black carriage pulled up in the fog just after twilight, its lacquered wood glinting beneath gas lamps like polished obsidian. No one stepped out for a moment. Then, as if summoned by breath alone, the door opened. Out came a woman wrapped in purple velvet, her gloved hands carrying nothing, her gaze sharper than any blade. She didn't knock. Madame Eloise met her at the threshold. "Lady Crowhurst," Madame said, voice low. "Lady, not miss, not madam. Lady." The word draped itself across the parlour like thick fabric. "I require a room," the woman replied smoothly. "Preferably one facing south, preferably quiet, preferably none of your regular comforts." Clara watched from the shadows of the stairs. The woman's face bore the kind of beauty sculpted for portraits, not mirrors. Her hair was pinned back with silver combs shaped like swans. Her accent clipped réalissant, but oddly precise. "I trust you know this isn't a hotel," Madame offered with a polite smile. The woman replied, "And I trust you know I'm not a guest." Later, Clara heard whispers from Ivy and Elsie. "She was once in court," Elsie said. "No, she was above it," Ivy murmured. "She knew Victoria, or the Duke, or someone with a crest." That night, Lady Crowhurst was given room 3 though. No clients were scheduled to visit it. The hallway near it was cleared. No music allowed. Lily was told not to sing. Even Madame adjusted her perfume. Clara caught a glimpse of the woman again, standing in the hallway, staring at a painting of 3 foxes beneath a full moon. She didn't react, just stared, then turned, cloak trailing like shadows. Over dinner, the girls whispered. "She has a ledger," May said. "She burns hers," Elsie replied. "No, she trades pages," Ivy added quietly. "Pages for silence, pages for favors." That night, Clara dreamed of carriages that arrived without names and rooms that spoke in whispers. She woke just before dawn, heart thudding without cause. From room 3, The door creaked open, and the woman exited in silence. She nodded once to Clara in passing, not greeting, but recognition, and just before stepping into her carriage, she looked back. "Tell Madame," she said softly, "the crown still watches." It happened while dusting. The carpet in room 6 was always slightly crooked. Clara, ever precise, pulled it back to straighten only to feel a small dip in the floor. Not a squeak, not a wobble, a dip. She tugged further and found a loose board. Inside were letters, 24 at least, each wrapped in waxed cloth, edges curled like dried petals. No stamps, no envelopes, only names: Edith L. Crowhurst, Madame Eloise, and one marked simply Clara. Her breath caught. That letter she didn't open. Not yet. She read others first. Snippets of lives whispered between ink lines. "The boy at the river never drowned. You were lied to. Her perfume is coded. Lilies mean silence. Roses mean danger. Crowhurst isn't a name. It's an instruction." Each page woven with secrets Clara didn't understand, but felt beneath her skin. Then Ivy burst in. "What are you doing?" Clara held up the letter marked with her name. Ivy paled. "That wasn't meant for you yet." Clara opened it anyway. Inside, "You are the shadow of the ledger. You will decide what is erased." That night, the music in the parlor faltered. Madame asked everyone to stay inside. A man had come looking for room 6. Not a client, a collector. Clara hid the letters behind her dresser, but the floor creaked again that night, and she wasn't sure it was from her own footsteps. Once a year, the city threw its veil off. Gaslights turned blue, red, and violet. Crowds spilled into cobbled streets, their faces hidden behind silken masks stitched with feathers, beads, and secrets. Music burst from every alley, violins from balconies, tambourines from rooftops. It was impossible to tell who anyone was. That was the point. Madame closed the brothel for the night. All girls were given costumes. Clara was dressed in emerald silk. Ivy wore gold and silver with bells. Elsie chose black with raven feathers that curled like smoke. "You must wear your mask," Madame said, "but be careful not to wear someone else's truth." Outside, people danced, laughed, whispered. Then Clara saw him, a man in a wolf mask. He didn't speak, just walked with her, gave her a red flower. No name, no gesture. She took it. Her hand burned slightly when she held it. Inside the petals was a folded note. "The carnival isn't for joy. It's for forgetting. Some truths cannot dance." Later, the girls returned, but Ivy was missing. Clara retraced steps, found herself in an alley she didn't know. The wolf was there again this time, standing beside a wall of mirrors. He pointed at one. Inside the mirror, Clara didn't see her reflection. She saw Ivy, tied to a chair, eyes wide. Then the mirror fogged. "Who is she to you?" the wolf whispered. "I don't know," Clara said, trembling. "Then she'll be nothing." Suddenly, Madame was behind her. "You asked too many questions," she said quietly, "and now the carnival wants answers." Clara couldn't sleep. The image of Ivy in the mirror haunted her, but there was no door, no location, no clue-gust fog and that burning red flower on her windowsill. She held the note again. "Some truths cannot dance." Suddenly, the mirror in her room pulsed faintly. Just once, like breath, she walked up to it. "Show me," she whispered. Nothing. She touched it. Then the wolf spoke, not aloud inside her thoughts. "If you seek Ivy, you must leave yourself behind. You must become the ledger." The mirror cracked, not shattered, just a thin fracture. But through it, she saw a corridor, velvet-lined, moonlit, endless. She stepped through. On the other side, a circular room, no windows, one chair, and a dozen masks mounted on the walls. Each carried a name: Eloise Crowhurst, Elsie, Clara ... and one that said, "Unknown." The wolf stood beside the chair. He removed his mask. There was no face beneath, only mirrored glass. "You wore me," he said, "and now I wear you." Clara turned. Her own mask was missing. Then she saw Ivy standing in the corner, untouched, unmoved, watching. "Is it you?" Clara asked, but Ivy didn't answer. The wolf placed a new mask in Clara's hands. It was blank, cold. "You must choose," he said, "a name or a truth." Clara placed the mask on her face and remembered nothing. The name on the visitor ledger was unfamiliar. Annabel Reeve. Clara didn't recognize it, but when the door opened, the woman gasped. "Clara?" she asked. Clara hesitated. "Yes." "No," Annabel whispered. "You're not her. You're someone else." She reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled photograph. The edges were burned. The center held two girls in white dresses standing beside a river. One was unmistakably Clara. The other was Annabel. "That was my sister," Annabel said. "She vanished the day after this was taken. Your face is hers, but your voice is not." Clara sat down, numb. "Ivy said you could help," Annabel added. "She said you remembered things you weren't supposed to." "I don't remember anything," Clara admitted. "Only the ledger and the masks." Annabel frowned. "Then you are part of the design, not the story." The mirror in the room shimmered again softly, subtly. Annabel didn't notice, but Clara did. She looked inside and saw herself wearing a different dress, speaking a different name. "Not Clara. Who am I?" she whispered. The mirror whispered back, "You were chosen once, then rejected." Suddenly, the wind burst through the window. The photograph flew into the fireplace. Flames licked it to ash. Annabel screamed. Madame appeared in the doorway. "Enough," she said. "She's not yours. She's everyone's," Annabel cried. "She was mine first." Clara stepped forward. "I'll find out who I was," she said quietly, "and who I am now." Madame didn't stop her. She only handed Clara a small key. "To room 13, she said, "but use it only when the mirror shows no face." That night, Clara stared into the glass. It showed fog and a single question. "Are you ready?" Clara waited until the mirror showed no reflection. Not fog, not faces, just emptiness. Then she used the key. The hallway darkened as she approached. No lamps, no voices. The doorknob was colder than the mirror had been. Inside, nothing, just four walls and a chair. Until the room blinked. Yes, blinked. A pulse of light passed over the ceiling, and suddenly the room changed. The wallpaper was lace. The windows were stained glass. On the floor, chalk markings swirled in symbols no language claimed. The chair turned slowly. No one sat in it, but a voice echoed, "You are not chosen. You are designed." Clara stepped forward. "What is this place?" The voice replied, "This is where names are made and erased." A file cabinet emerged from the wall, drawers unlabeled. Clara opened one. Inside masks, hundreds, each had a name. Each had an emotion written beside it. Clara, defiance, Elsie, betrayal, Crow hissed, control, unknown, hunger, and one mask had no name, but its emotion read, truth. She lifted it. The moment she did, the room folded. Literally walls folded in, space reversed. She was now outside the brothel, but no one recognized her. She wore a new mask. She looked down. Her dress was different. Her hands were gloved. She smelled of lilies. She wasn't Clara anymore. She wasn't anyone. The ledger no longer had her page, only a note, erased for entry. Inside room 13, a candle flickered. Behind the candle, a new voice whispered. The mirror lied. You were chosen. Rain soaked the city the next morning. Clara wandered without a mask, the chill biting through her gloves. A memory tugged at her font and flickering of a woman made of paper, stepping into flames. It wasn't a dream. It was a warning. Behind the brothel, tucked between two shuttered shops, she found a narrow door painted the color of dried blood. The key for Madame worked. Inside, a library, but not of books. Stacks of ledgers, journals, unbound pages, each written in different hands. Different inks, but the same signature at the bottom. She traced a path through the parchment until she found her name. Not Clara, Celeste. And beside it, erased 2 years ago, rewritten as Clara, reason, ledger, imbalance. Ledger, imbalance. She whispered aloud. Then came the rustle. Someone else was there. Not the wolf. Not Madame. Not Annabel. A girl. Pale. Eyes. Ink black. Skin thin as vellum. You're in my chapter, she said softly. Clara stepped back. What are you? I was never chosen, the girl replied. But I was copied, and Copy's tear. She handed Clara a sheet. It showed a sketch Clara's face, weeping. Beneath it, a line. Truth bleeds, but ink burns. Suddenly, flames burst from one of the stacks. The paper girl vanished into them quietly, like sun. Clara raced out with only one page saved. It held one word. The legend at the bottom read, "You are next." Clara didn't sleep. The word Crowhorst echoed in her thoughts, not as a person, but as a role, assigned. Like a mask that never chose its wearer, Madame summoned her at dusk. "The ceremony begins when the mirror shows only ash," she said. "What happens if I refuse?" Clara asked. Madame smiled not warmly. "The name finds you anyway." Room 3 had been prepared. Not with velvet this time, but bone-colored linens and silver threads stitched into the walls. Ivy stood in the corner, her mask lowered. "You came back," Clara whispered. "I never left," Ivy replied. "You just weren't looking in the right reflection." Then came the chant, not aloud. It began in Clara's thoughts, a rhythm, a pattern, a ledger being a silver bowl held torn pages. Each page bore a name, Elsie Madame Eloise Celeste, and one blank. The flame turned violet. The bowl pulsed. Madame offered Clara a pin. "One drop of ink," she said, "from your veins." Clara pricked her finger. The ink swirled in the bowl. The blank page fluttered, and then the flame went out. Silence. The mirror reflected the room, but Clara was gone. In her place, not wearing Clara's face, wearing her memory. Her voice spoke not from a throat, but from every wall. Crowhurst must hold balance. Truth must be weighed, and Clara must disappear. Then Ivy stepped forward. She held a mask. It was Clara's. "Were it once more," she begged, "be remembered." Clara took it, but the mask crumbled. She looked down. Her hands weren't hers anymore. The ledger had chosen, and Clara had become the name. Rain didn't stop. The sky mourned with a steadiness that felt intentional. Inside the brothel, the girls lit candles, not for Clara but for someone none of them could fully remember. Just flashes, a laugh here, a dance step there, a kindness pressed into a note she never claimed. Elsie wrote a poem on the wall in chalk. It started, "She once wore velvet, then she wore wind." Ivy placed a mask beside room 6's door. It was cracked. It bore no name, but every girl touched it in passing. Madame didn't speak all day. She moved through rooms like a shadow stitched into the rugs. At twilight, a stranger arrived. He didn't ask for company, didn't request music, didn't know the rules. He placed a book on the parlor table. It was the ledger, but not the one they kept. This one had no names, only initials, and one line written at the end. "A name is not a girl is not a mask." But sometimes memory wears both. The stranger lit one candle and walked out into the rain. Later that night, Ivy swore she heard Clara humming from room 13, but when she opened the door, it was empty, except for one scrap of paper. It read, "Still here, It began with Ivy. She woke to find her pillow damp not with tears or rain, but ink, black, viscous, still fresh. The paper on her nightstand had no words, until she blinked. Then they appeared. "Do not read aloud. The ink listens." Throughout the house, strange pages began materializing, slipped under doors, folded into corsets, hidden between sugar tins in the pantry. Clara's name surfaced again. Not Clara, not Celeste, just a symbol of feather dipped in flame. Elsie found a note tucked inside her mirror. "Crowhurst remembers the ones who forget." Madame summoned all the girls. "This is not intrusion," she said. "It is reckoning." She handed each of them a candle. "Leave it unlit until the ink chooses your truth." Then the piano played, though no one sat at it. A melody familiar to Clara. Somehow, it tugged at a memory she didn't have, and yet belonged to. She followed the notes down the hallway. Room 13 was locked, but on the door, an ink drawing had appeared. Clara's face, half erased. Suddenly, the ledger opened itself in the parlor. Pages turned, stopped. A new entry appeared. Name, Clara. Status, transferred emotion, residual, warning, ink requests host. Ivy touched the page. It burned her skin. The ledger snapped shut. Silence fell. Then the chandelier flickered. Shadows danced, and the walls began to hum not music, not whispers, script, writing itself, all over the brothel. The next story begins with a girl made of ink. The brothel pulsed with ink. Walls whispered, floorboards sighed, and mirrors refused to show faces. Clara stood in room 3, maskless, nameless. The mirror in front of her no longer shimmered, it bled. Black lines dripped from its corners, curling into words only half legible. The host is chosen. The ink is ready. Behind her, Ivy held the ledger, every page blank, except one, Clara, awaiting transcription. Suddenly, the mirror trembled, then spoke, not aloud, not in thoughts, in ink. Lines raced across the glass, forming a figure, a girl stitched from script, eyes like quotation marks, hair flowing like cursive. "I am you," it said, "or you are me. Depends who writes first." Clara reached out. Her fingertips didn't touch glass, they touched warmth. "I don't remember choosing," she whispered. "You didn't," the mirror replied. "The ink did." Then a door appeared behind the glass. On it, her name, not Clara, not Celeste, just Crowher. A quill floated beside it. Write her name, she'd enter as herself. Leave it blank, she'd enter as ink. Clara hesitated. Ivy stepped forward. "If you become the host, the ledger listens, but you may never be read." Clara touched the quill. She wrote one word, truth. The mirror opened. She stepped through and vanished. The ink on the mirror faded. The glass cleared. Only one line remained. Truth has no name, only reflection. Somewhere in the east wing of the British Library, buried between maps of vanished empires and letters smuggled during wartime, sat a book. No title, no author, no catalogue number. But when opened, it began. Clara Hughes walked into fog and became legend. Clara didn't know who wrote it, but she found it just days after stepping out of the mirror. The text flickered when touched, pages rearranged, chapter headings danced. Every time she blinked, the ending changed. Once it said, "She chose memory." Another time, she was erased. Then, unexpectedly, she rewrote everything. Back at the brothel, Ivy read the same book. Her version ended with Clara walking away, mask crumbling, name forgotten. Elsie read it too. Her version ended with Clara becoming Madame. No two stories matched, yet all were about Clara. The book adapted to its reader. Madame Eloise locked it in a drawer. The ledger was never the only record, she told Clara. There are wild pages, stories not bound to truth, but to reflection. Clara whispered, "Is that why I exist differently now?" Madame nodded. "You were written by ink, but now you're being read. That changes you." Outside, rain began again, and somewhere, a reader, perhaps one not born yet, opened a dusty page and saw Clara's name. But they didn't know the brothel existed, or that velvet could carry grief, or that one ledger had nearly rewritten her soul. They only read the story. They believed it fiction. But Clara, standing under a gas lamp, whispering to the wind, knew better. The ink had a heartbeat now, and someone, somewhere, was reading it. The brothel was quiet. No whispers behind velvet, no footsteps echoing on the stairwell. Even the city seemed to hush. Clara stood at the mirror, the same one she'd stepped through weeks ago. It shimmered faintly, no longer showing her reflection but stories. She saw Ivy on a train, eyes scanning landscapes she'd never imagined she'd see. She saw Elsie opening a cafe, filling it with warm bread and louder laughter. She saw Madame Eloise placing the ledger on a shelf next to a box labeled unfinished. And then she saw herself, not in velvet, not hidden, just Clara, standing in a library where her name was never footnoted, but centered. Outside, rain slowed to a drizzle. A knock echoed downstairs. Not a client, just a stranger holding a letter. "For you," the stranger said. It wasn't sealed. It was written in Clara's handwriting. She opened it. It read, "To whoever reads me next. The brothel is closed, but stories don't end, they continue, in disguise. If you find a velvet page, write on it, 'Love.'" C.H. Clara looked at the mirror. It faded. She didn't need it anymore. And with that, Velvet Shadows closes, but only in this form. Clara's story now belongs to everyone who's ever searched for their truth behind a curtain. The rain ceased. Velvet cooled beneath the hush. Clara turned one final page, whispering its name to the moonlight. "Good night." In the quiet, a candle flickered once, then went still. No more curtains, no more mirrors, just a door that stayed open and a world that listened. Outside, someone walked past the brothel, never knowing who once lived behind its walls. But they felt something like memory stitched into shadow. And inside, where the stories had been read, written, Clara slept. Her story didn't end. It simply rested. If you like this, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment that really motivates us. Good night.